It's wonderful not just to have internally focused this great society where as Jews we can celebrate our identity, where Chabad can do the great work that it does. Chabad is everywhere. And where we can do things, just so some of the people on the panel understand this, this is sort of like almost like a Jewish Christmas where you go around giving people presents. Mishlach Manot in particular is sort of it's a lot of fun to give people presents, more in the giving than in the receiving, as they say. But the message of Purim that I want to conclude with is, I'm sorry, not a pleasant one. It's the message of Haman and what happened to Haman. And isn't it interesting that all these years later it's Persia. We're talking about Persia. And we have probably now the greatest threat to world peace in Persia with the evil Ahmadinejad. And I don't know whether in 1,000 years' time the Jews will be taking these and in the case of Ahmadinejad's name adding it to Haman. But certainly both Josh and Greg have referred to it, and I know all of the other speakers agree with this. The Jews are like the little bird at the bottom of the coal mine that they used to keep to see whether the gas was going to explode the coal mine. We're that little bird in world history and world democracy to see whether the safety of the world is being threatened or not. Now, the threat of Iran to Israel, the explicit threat made by the President of Iran to wipe out a sovereign state, the sight of a president of a country holding a conference that said that there is no mass extermination of the Jewish people during the Second World War, the sight of a little Levantine man, President of Iran, standing there with David Duke of the Ku Klux Klan, must send a shiver down the spine of any person, Jew, non-Jew, any Democrat all around the world, because what it symbolises is here is a country that is led by deeply crazy people. Deeply crazy people. People like Haman. People who would, against the interests of their own civilisation, bring destruction of another people. And the problem with Iran is that it threatens not just Israel, it has rockets that threaten Riyadh and Cairo and Moscow and even Paris and Bonn and Berlin now. So the problem that the Jews face with annihilation, etc., we've seen during the Second World War, the message is if we don't stand up to this kind of intolerance, if we don't stand up to genocide, if we don't stand up to these kind of threats, it visits us first, but it comes and visits everyone else afterwards. That's why I find it my obligation in Federal Parliament always to raise issues of Darfur and Rwanda, etc. It should be the Jews who are the first people to raise the issue of genocide. We don't want it visited on us, we don't want it visited on anyone else. Chag Sameach. Sorry it's a dark message, but it's that point in world history.
At 34, Daniel Andrews has ascended to become Minister for Consumer Affairs, Minister for Gaming, and the Minister assisting the Premier for Multicultural Affairs. And with 5 million people in Victoria from over 250 different countries, representing about 130 different cultures and traditions, he's really got his job ahead of him. So he's not only a minister, he's the member for Mulgrave, he's the former Deputy Campaign Manager for the Victorian ALP. I'd like you to welcome Daniel Andrews.
Shalom and good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to be here today and to be joined by my parliamentary colleagues, and I'll just go in order. Michael Danby, the Federal Member for Melbourne Ports, and I acknowledge Joshua as well. Thank him for his kind words. To Helen Shea, the Member for Caulfield. Tony Lupton, my parliamentary colleague from the State Parliament as well. Member for Moran, Greg Hunt, Member for Flinders here representing the Prime Minister, and of course our Lord Mayor John Sow. not just a great friend of the Jewish community, but also a great friend of multiculturalism right across Victoria. I come to bring the best wishes of the Premier of Victoria, Steve Bracks, today, and to all of you, I wish you a happy Purim. This is a wonderful opportunity to come together and talk about very significant moments in history. It's an important opportunity for you to celebrate your own cultural heritage, and importantly to pass it on to younger members of the Jewish community here in the centre of Melbourne, and indeed I'm sure that celebrations like this are going on not just here in the centre of Melbourne, but indeed right across our state. We as a community can be very proud of the fact that Victoria is a tolerant and a particularly harmonious place to live and work. Our cultural diversity is a great strength. Our cultural diversity is what makes us an interesting and dynamic and great place to live. We have to value that. We have to value the many different voices, the many different backgrounds that come together to, as I said, make us a dynamic place to live. It's a great strength. It should never be taken for granted. We need to be loud about the fact that cultural diversity, multiculturalism, a multi-faith community is a precious thing. We have to value it, we have to stand up for it. And as a government, that's what we've tried to do over the last 7 years, and very much so in a bipartisan way, right across the political differences that sometimes dominate the discussion about public policy. Multiculturalism and respect for cultural diversity is something that I think we share right across the Victorian political spectrum, and that's perhaps reflected today in the fact that we have representatives from all of those different tendencies within Victorian and indeed national politics. As I said, cultural diversity is important, and as a government we've worked hard to support that in a whole range of different ways. There's grassroots support through the grants and other programs that the Victorian Multicultural Commission run, and we've proudly boosted the amount of money that we invest in that important sector to provide Jewish organisations and many other organisations with the financial and practical support that they need. And again, we have to always remember that so many volunteers make our multiculturalism work. So many people who are not paid work so hard in a multicultural, multi-faith community to talk about tolerance, to talk about and celebrate cultural heritage, and to make sure that we value it always. But also in a number of other ways, the government and others have worked hard to send very clear messages and very clear signals about the value of tolerance, the value of harmony. And whether it be through the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act passed through the Parliament of Victoria, whether it be the Human Rights Charter put through by the Attorney-General last year, whether it be community accords, whether it be simply attending functions like this and working hard to honour and celebrate the contribution that so many different ethnic communities, multi-faith communities have made to the Victoria that we enjoy today. We in Victoria have worked hard as a government and as a parliament, I think, to celebrate and to make sure that the community understands very, very firmly and openly that the cultural diversity, multiculturalism and a multi-faith community is what makes us special. That's what makes us a great place to live. Can I say that in those endeavours, whether it be the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act or other laws that we have passed through the Victorian Parliament, there has been no louder supporter than Victoria's Jewish people. The Jewish community in Victoria, and it's picking up perhaps on what Michael said in terms of the history and the great difficulties and the great tragedy that the Jewish community has experienced over so many years, does place a burden, an obligation, a duty, if you like, on members of Melbourne and Victoria's Jewish community to be loud about these issues, to be proud about them and to speak up on behalf of other minority groups and to be really firm in terms of the notion of fairness, the notion of tolerance, the notion of respecting and embracing the cultural differences, the multiculturalism that makes us such a great place to live. And I want to thank the Jewish community on behalf of the Premier Steve Bracks and on behalf of the government, and I think on behalf of the vast majority of people in Victoria, people of goodwill, who understand that when you pass laws through the Victorian Parliament, you send a clear message. You set a set of boundaries. You put in place notions that they are only words, but they are important. They're important today and they're important in the years to come, in setting a scene, in giving clear direction to the community about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Today is about celebration.